Everyone is a theologian. If you've ever asked questions about who God is, what he's like, what he asks of you, who you are in relation to him, and how the world works, then you're doing theology. So we wanted to explore the real lives and stories of everyday theologians here in Houston and explore what it looks like to take your faith outside of Sunday mornings and Bible studies into the real world. So welcome to Everyday Theology. I am joined today by my dear friend, Christi Pramudji-Dawe, and we're going to get to her whole story in just one second. But I'm Sarah Stone. I'm the Executive Director for Theology by the Pint, which is the ministry this is born out of. We talk about really cool things around craft beer here in Houston. So if you live in the area or you want to live stream it in from somewhere else, go to theologybythepint.org to find out about all of our events, how you can give, how you can support us, who we are, who our leadership team is, all that good stuff. But I just want to climb right in. I'm not going to do all the normal stuff about everyone's a theologian. I think we've done enough of these now. People get it. Christi, thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited.
Thank you for inviting me, Sarah.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this.
Yay. So let's start. We're going to dive into the deep end. Start a little bit. Tell us who you are, how you grew up. Did you grow up in a Christian home? How did you come to be a person of faith? How did you come to be a believer?
Okay, yeah, this is my favorite story. So I grew up, born in Texas, and grew up Catholic primarily. My father and his family were Roman Catholic, so was catechized, confirmed in the Catholic Church as a child. And then in the summers, I would go stay with my grandmother in East Texas, and we did Assemblies of God Church.
Ooh,
so I had
the
complete gamut there. Well, I just say about in high school, I started to really drift away I didn't want to go to church, and I had this sense like, I'm a nice person, I'm a pretty good person, I don't know why I need religion. Why do I need to spend time on that? And as I went through college, I kind of went through atheism, agnosticism, really just busy with my life and my education, and didn't really think it mattered.
Yeah.
Really didn't think it mattered. Whatever you want, whatever you want to believe. Very postmodern thinking.
Yes.
Okay. So fast forward, I go to medical school, and I came to a crisis of an existential crisis. Who am I? What is my life all about? Began to grapple with healing from some trauma that I experienced as a child. And began to start a spiritual search.
Yeah.
Before I started a spiritual search, I began a search for Christi to find who is Christi.
Yeah.
And that involved a journey across the nation, driving by myself to California with my dog, going into ultimate Frisbee, to connecting with that kind of hippie culture.
This is such a funny sentence. Sorry. The new age practice of Frisbee. But you were
I was just searching.
free.
Yeah. Trying out different personas and, who am I? What fits for me? Well, I came to the point where I realized there is a spiritual lack in my life. There is a spiritual need that I cannot deny any further. So what am I going to do? So I began to, I was exposed to a lot of new age.
Probably through the Frisbees.
Theology, through the Frisbees.
That's the gateway. Okay, I'm going to stop with the Frisbee. Sorry.
And I worshipped a goddess for a while that I just kind of made up. And then
Whoa. I don't know this part of your story.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew about soul searching and
I've still got my
worshipped?
Journals. I kind of drew a picture of her. Yeah. That was whenever I was kind of spiritually searching.
Okay.
And then what happened was one of my dear friends from college named Michelle, I was very depressed at that time too. And that was when Prozac first came out. And I happened to be on the psychiatry rotation in medical school. And the professor said, Christi, you're depressed. You need to go on Prozac. And so I said, okay. And I felt amazing. So my friend Michelle calls me, and she's brilliant. And she had been going through a lot of difficulties in higher education. And anyway, she called me, and we're connecting. We're going to see each other at Christmas time. It's about October. And I said, I have great news for you. And I was going to tell her about Prozac because I knew it would help her so much. And she said, I have great news for you too, but I'm going to tell you in person. And I said, no, you have to tell me now. What is it? And she told me she'd become a Christian.
Oh, okay.
And I thought, oh no, Michelle.
Oh no.
Oh gosh.
We lost another one.
Off the deep end. Well, that led me to think, well, maybe I should consider it, And I thought, okay, I'm going to research all the great religions of the world, and I'm going to pick the one I think is best. And I guess I'll just start with Christianity, since I grew up with that.
Yeah.
And just look at it and try to have an open mind.
Yeah.
And God had just orchestrated several encounters and resources over the previous 2 years of medical school. And all of that came flooding back to me. So I remembered one of my classmates was reading Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And I thought, okay, I'm going to read that book that she said it was good. So I read the book, and I was intellectually convinced. I thought, wow, okay, this makes sense. Jesus is either Lord, liar, or lunatic.
Yeah.
Which one is he? I think he must be Lord.
Yeah.
So then I thought, okay, I'm going to go back and read my Bible. I haven't read it since I was a kid. So I opened up my Good News Bible from my Catholic upbringing, and I read the book of John because one of my professors had told me, Christi, I can see that you're struggling. When you're ready to look into the Bible, I want you to consider starting with the book of John.
One of your professors told you that?
He did. Yeah, he was very bold in the faith.
I was going to say, that's
His name was Dr. Boyce, and he was an anesthesiologist. And he got in a lot of trouble for it, too.
Did he really?
He did.
Oh.
So, and a lot of my classmates that weren't Christian were just annoyed. Like, were mad. They'd go in and meet with him, and they'd come out with this advice. Anyway, so I remembered that. So I read the book of John, and my heart was convinced. I thought, gosh, I think this is true. And this is the peace and the the love that I'm just longing for. And so then I kind of just pondered that in my heart. And I was in my apartment, and my roommate watched the 700 Club, and I turned on the TV, and she wasn't there, but it was on. And this man on there, he said, I have a prayer for someone out there. And I thought, okay, I'm going to pray with him. And he just said, God, I think you're true. I want to believe. Show me that you're true. And I believe, and I confess I'm a sinner in need of a Savior. I put my trust in you. And it was literally the scales fell off, like Paul says.
Wow.
That the light, creation looked different. I could see. I hit the road for a road trip right after that, and I could see the beauty of creation with a whole new light. That, oh my God, you made this for me to enjoy and for all of us to enjoy. You have a plan. I could not sleep before that moment. I couldn't sleep before that moment. And I would lay down that night, and I could literally just feel Jesus Christ just wrapping his arms around me and going, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
You just need to follow me step by step. And so I had so much peace. I had some difficulties with my family because of the childhood abuse and trauma. And God gave me the grace to be able to forgive and to be able to restore relationships. And that started my journey of faith when I was about 25 years old.
Wow.
So about 30 years ago. Yeah, I just celebrated my 30-year birthday.
Of being a believer.
With Jesus, with being a follower.
Oh, man, I love that. I love all the pieces of it.
It's a really
there was
cool.
a cerebral piece. There was a kind of heart piece. You turn on the TV at the right time to, sort of be coached through the prayer and just.
It was so cool what he did.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand the depth of my sinfulness at that moment. I was just so drawn to the love of Christ, just his love and the peace and joy that he offered me and to all of us. And when I told my friends, this was Christmas break, and so I go back from Christmas break, and I told my friends. So my one friend, his name was Buck, and he was one of my Frisbee friends. He was a Christian, and we were throwing the Frisbee for about 20 minutes. And I said, "Oh, Buck, by the way, I became a Christian." And he had been praying for me for 2 years, like a whole group of them had been praying for me.
Did you know that?
No, and I would not let them talk to me about God. I would literally go, "I don't want to talk about God.
Yeah,
I don't want to talk about it," because I knew better. Because they were dumb.
Yeah,
and I was smart. And And he came running over, and I was like, "What? Did you think I was that bad?"
Oh, funny. And he's like,
I
well,
did not
don't read
understand.
Romans anytime soon.
God, God's so gracious. He just gives us what we can understand at the pace that we can understand it,
Yeah.
So,
well, I have a question going backwards and a question going forwards. Going backwards, did you ditch the goddess, or that had already kind of phased out?
Yeah, I totally ditched the goddess. Gosh, I think it had kind of phased out.
Yeah.
I kind of realized like, this is kind of dumb,
Yeah. Well, you're a woman of science, so maybe that was part of the.
I don't know. I knew that it was, just in my heart of hearts, I knew that it wasn't real.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything that was going to give me life.
Yeah. And then moving forward, did you get connected with like a church or a community to kind of grow and learn more? What did that look like?
Yeah. So it was kind of interesting. So Buck, my friend Buck, so he said, okay, I said, well, I don't know where to go to church. I told him like Catholic, Assemblies of God. He said,
let's pick something right in the middle.
Listen to this. So he said, well, I go to a charismatic Episcopal church.
Oh,
okay.
Best of every world.
Perfect. So I started going there, met one of my dearest friends ever there, Gina, and began to I got some discipleship. And at the same time, through my medical school, there was a very active ministry, which was part of the Christian Medical and Dental Association. And so I got hooked in with that. So I started getting a lot of actually Reformed theology teaching.
Yes, Reformed theology.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where I started with Reformed theology and some Bible study and discipleship. And so I stayed with that charismatic Episcopal church for about 2 or 3 years until I moved to Houston.
Yeah.
And then when I moved to Houston, that was another journey. Okay, now where am I going to go to church? You can't find a charismatic Episcopal church on every corner. And I was kind of already not completely
on board
with the charismatic part, with people falling out and running around dancing. And it just seemed kind of chaotic and didn't feel right. And so I visited several different churches. I accidentally visited a cult.
What?
And I ran out of there, and I ended up landing at Second Baptist Church.
Yeah.
I had been listening to Ed Young on the radio when I was in medical school. And so I visited his church, and I had a patient actually that said, well, he went there and he said, if you're looking for the perfect church, that's not it, but you're never going to find it. And it's a solid church, And I said, okay, I'll just go there. I just know that it's biblical,
Yeah.
And so I stayed there for a few years until eventually went to the Presbyterian church.
Where we met.
Yes. That's where we became friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other story that if you want to hear, you should buy me a drink and maybe Christi will come and we'll tell you all the spicy parts of the beginning, fledgling part of our friendship, which was so fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned medical school and being part of this medical, like Christians in medicine and dental something. So tell us about, what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm a physician, and I did my residency training in urology.
Okay.
And that was a whole other story because I was going to do gynecology, and then I did a rotation at the very last minute in urology, and I fell in love with it. Urologists are just great people. They're fun. They're funny. They're good.
You have to have a sense of humor because you're dealing with
You're dealing with all kinds of stuff. They're very smart, and we got lots of cool technology, and I love technology. So I went to this anesthesiologist, Dr. Boyce, that I told you about, and I said, Dr. Boyce, I was a baby Christian 1 year. And I said, I don't know how to decide this. And he said, did you pray about it?
Yeah.
I said, of course. I said, he said, did you make your pros and cons? Yes. He said, okay, just decide. And I said, what? I said, what? Isn't he going to tell me something? Or he goes, that's why he gave you a brain.
Yes.
That's why he gives you smarts and experience.
Aww.
He goes, he's going to be glorified. If you've given it to him,
yes,
he's going to be glorified if it's the right or the wrong decision.
She's using air quotes if you're just listening.
Yeah. And so I just decided, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for it. And I've just loved it. I love urology. I know it's not the most glamorous surgical specialty, but it is really, really cool, and it makes a big impact on people's lives. And so
Wait, real quick, if people are listening and they have not taken anatomy anytime recently, what is urology?
Oh, okay. Urology, we deal with any kind of issues with the bladder, the kidneys, so kidney stones, I do a lot of leaky bladders, drop bladders, and then with men, it could be their prostate issues. And then we also get into sexual dysfunction issues, intimate wellness. And then of late, I've gotten into more hormone balancing and kind of looking holistically at the person. I've just realized as a specialist, there's only so much I can do for people if I only focus on their one little body part,
Yeah.
And so there's some very simple things that I've learned that if we can help them with those things, it can make a big difference, not just for that body part, but for their whole self.
Okay, take a drink. And then I want you to tell us about you were working in this industry, but then you started your own practice. I want to hear about that. I want to hear about how it kind of expanded and then what you're up to now. And then we'll go from there.
Okay.
So,
I came out of residency and I went into a small group practice with some wonderful men. There were 6 of us at that time. We grew to 12, and they were great, and they were really wonderful to let me work part-time when I had babies. So I would work half days while my children were little, and pretty much until they were almost out of high school, I just worked when they were at school. And
that's such a gift.
I know.
So cool.
It was and that was one reason actually why I became a doctor was because I wanted to have some kind of control over my time to be a mother and a working woman. So it was such a blessing. And so I did that for 12 years. And then I just had this vision of a urology practice just for women. Now, I was pretty much mostly women at that point already, but I wanted a little safe haven where they could go, where it almost had kind of like a spa, relaxing feel, because there's a lot of anxiety around that, going to the doctor for that part of your body.
Yeah.
You don't know what they're going to do to you. You don't know if they're going to be gentle
invasive
or if they're going to be crass or, I just wanted to make it like, okay, you can feel safe here. And so I had this vision and I just went for it. I just said, okay, most doctors aren't going into solo practice these days, but I just feel like this is what God wants me to do and I'm going to do it. And if it fails, it fails, I'll find a job. And so by God's grace, here we are 10 years later and the practice has grown tremendously.
Hey guys. Sarah Stone here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is a riveting podcast episode, but Theology by the Pint needs your help to continue providing these podcasts, offering our in-person events, and growing so we can bring thoughtful conversation and the hope of the gospel to a world that's increasingly walking away from church and from faith. Now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible, so we've crunched the numbers, and if each listener of this episode gave just $1 for each episode you listen to, we'd put a huge dent in our annual budget. So consider giving today. Go to theologybythepint.org/give and click the link to donate. Thanks so much, and now back to our show.
We've got 17 employees, 3 physician assistants. It's been just a wonderful journey.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've really kind of gotten into more functional medicine, integrative medicine, trying to bring all the pieces together and how they're all so important. I think, and really, as I'm getting older, longevity. How can we live longer, healthier and be healthier for the long run so we can be more functional? And then from my Christian perspective, I want to serve God in the best way possible as long as possible.
Yeah.
And so the more that I'm healthy, I'm not dealing with health issues and I'm functional and I'm enjoying my life, the more I'm going to be able to serve him and share his message of love and salvation with more people through what I do and just through whatever platform that I have.
Yeah. Well, that brings us then to your latest kind of adventure. Tell us about the book.
So I actually wrote a book
this
year. It just came out. It's called The BioVitality Blueprint. And it's a plan for really elite health and a joyful life. And what I do is I share my own journey over the last few years and what I've learned about my health and been able to apply and then give people tips and pointers for what they can do. And I integrate, I bring in together faith. I lay out the basic foundation for a healthy life is what you eat and how, how you eat, moving, exercising, keep working your body, and then faith. You can't have a joyful, meaningful life if you're just super healthy. That alone is not going to cut it. You have to have faith. You have to be connected to God. He's the source of life.
That's right.
He's the source of energy. And if we're not connected with him, we're just missing the boat. And so, and then I also bring in some very basic things that, like hormone optimization, metabolic optimization, things that help the body function optimally. And being a urologist, I bring in intimate health too, because I think that is
that's a fancy way of talking about sex. Yes.
Sexual health. Yes. Yeah. Intimate health, being able to enjoy sex throughout your life. And how we can, some of the technologies and treatments that are available to help with that, and why that's important to overall health and wellness. And to longevity. And actually there's studies that show that people that are connected with their spouse and they have a warm, intimate relationship, that they live longer and they're healthier. There's so many health benefits to that. And so so that's kind of my angle on longevity and regenerative medicine.
I heard, we won't get into this here on our podcast, but I heard you on another podcast where he was just asking you all kinds of questions about that aspect, the sexual intimacy. And you shared, I mean, you, at some point something came up about abortion and you're like, well, I'm actually pro-life. And I actually think that God has something to say about this. And then next thing you know, you're talking about body parts that you're not supposed to say on the air. And it was hilarious. Anyway, but I love that you get to shine the light of Christ in these interesting spaces. It's not just that it's medicine. It's also sort of the part of medicine we're not supposed to talk about. And so I'm encouraged that you're doing that. So tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a Christian in the space of medicine, being a doctor, being around doctors and nurses and that field. Like, is that, I mean, you said your professor got in trouble. Do you feel like that's been like that for you? Or
I have not, actually. I have not had any problems that I'm aware of. I mean, I don't know, like maybe things have been passed me by because of it, but I've been very outspoken about my faith. I think, I mean, that's our mandate as Christians. We are supposed to proclaim the name of Christ unapologetically, unashamedly. I can't say I've always been super bold. There have been times where I've shrunk back, but I've tried to always move forward in that regard. The way that I'm very open about my faith with my employees and my patients. In fact, whenever I do surgery on any patient, I will offer them a prayer of blessing, and I'll just ask God to guide. I'll acknowledge God's just faithfulness and provision for this day of surgery to take care of this woman. I thank God for her life and what she means to the people in her life. And then I thank him for giving me the skills and experience, and ask him to guide my hands, my eyes, my mind, and for the whole team. And that she will have a very easy recovery. And so, and patients I would say maybe there's been one or two patients in 20 years that have said, well, okay, if you want to. I mean, most people are like, oh, yes,
I'll take
thank
anything.
you. Yes, they're very grateful. They're very grateful. It means a lot to them. And they will say, I've never had people that have gone through a lot of surgery, they'll say, I've never had a doctor pray with me. And there'll be nurses or anesthesiologists in the room sometimes. It's usually in the pre-op area. There's a lot of stuff going on. And so everybody just pauses and prays, and
I love that.
And they don't
so
really, they don't say anything to me. I mean, so I carry on. And
has that ever opened up the door for either someone that you work with or one of your patients to ask you more about your faith?
Yes, it absolutely has. Yes, I've had patients that have said that it really impacted them.
Yeah.
There was one man a few years ago. I don't know.
I thought it was only women.
I know. At the very beginning of my career, when I had some male patients, I had a transgender patient, and he was not. He was living kind of as a woman, but he wasn't like on a lot of hormones or anything. But I shared with him, and I treated him for prostate cancer, and he came back and I was very bold about, just about Christ and how he created us. And he came back a few years later and he was not living as a woman anymore.
Oh, wow.
He had realized that was not correct.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I had any impact on that or not, but he kind of indicated that
you were
it meant something. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
In fact, I just think this is cool. You recorded a little when there was just a lot of chatter a few years ago about transgender stuff going on, especially like laws having to do with like puberty blockers. Mm-hmm. You made a little video about how this is not. And I don't even think you brought faith into it, but you just said, medically speaking, this is not good for children. These are the risks. You mess with your fertility, all of these things. And then a couple years later, you were on Libs of TikTok. She featured you, and then I went and read all the comments that people said.
Yeah, that was crazy. That little TikTok. I mean, I only did like 2 like that. I had this very. I felt this obligation because the medical community was being so quiet about it. And a lot of the organizations, which are run by very left-leaning secularists, they were also coming out in support of transitioning children.
Yeah.
And I went on the, so here's where I did get a lot of pushback. I went on the Women Docs in Urology Facebook page and I said, hey everybody, I feel like we, as urologists, we especially have an obligation to say how this can affect their life and their sexual function and their just everything. Is there any organization that you guys know of that is working on this that we can join forces? And I got so much pushback on there. I got, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't treat transgender children. You shouldn't say anything. You should talk to them personally. You're, just a lot of attacks. I had few people, I would say 3 or 4, message me privately to say that they supported me.
That's always how it is. Be bold and say that publicly. Yeah. So I went on TikTok and I just made that little PSA, public service announcement to just say, listen, because I know that kids are on TikTok. That's where they get a lot of this information about transgenderism, and they get persuaded to pursue that. So I went on there and I called myself Trans MD. And you called yourself Trans MD?
I did, because I knew that might catch some of these kids maybe.
Oh, so
and
sneaky,
I just let
Christi.
them know, this will destroy your fertility if you do this. It's not 100%, okay, but it's a high likelihood.
Yeah.
You got to think about that. This is kind of irreversible stuff.
Yep.
And so, and it just destroys their genital area. So anyway, it got picked up on Libs of TikTok and then Fox News and Tucker.
Oh my goodness.
My goodness. A lot of people, it got a lot of play. Yeah. So, and I didn't get any pushback from that. I mean, I don't think everybody watches everything that everybody does. So there were a lot of comments on there, I hope she doesn't get fired. She's going to get fired 3, 2, 1,
Oh, there were a lot of things about how you were going to get canceled. But then I knew you had recorded it a couple years prior. And I think she's still doing pretty well.
Well, and that's why I like to stay independent in independent practice, because then I can, run the medical practice the way that I think is the best way to be run, and to be able to share these things and be open about my faith and take my time with just simple things too, take my time with my patients that, if you're in a big group, and my group that I was in before became corporate owned, doctors just, it's you gotta run patients through, and I'm not willing to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I've noticed, this isn't in the questions I said I was going to ask, so maybe you won't have anything at the ready, and that's okay. But I've noticed just in the last few years, it feels like you've had sort of a resurgence of, or a new kind of excitement about your faith. You're bolder, I don't know if there's just an extra dash of joy, and everyone has to know how beautiful, my relationship with the Lord is and how amazing Jesus is. Where do you think that comes from? Is that just a kind of natural, next step of maturation, or?
Well, it comes from suffering.
Okay.
It comes from all the suffering that I've been through.
I don't know if you want to say anything about that, or if you want to just leave that
I went through a divorce that was very painful, very difficult. The last few years of the marriage the last 3 or 4 years was, the marriage turned out to be not what I thought it was. even though we were very faithful about going to church and being involved and being a member, not just a member, but an active member, leaders in the church, doing everything quote unquote right. And expecting that because we're doing everything right, that God's going to bless us and everything is going to be great. And then the marriage wasn't what I thought it was. And so we began this process trying to repair, forgive, build up trust again, and went through all kinds of different things, counseling and retreats and what have you. And it just became apparent it wasn't going to be able to be repaired. And so I got divorced, and then my teenagers started having a very difficult time around COVID, and they've gone through a lot of mental health struggles that they've been dealing with, and they're still dealing with to some degree. And so out of that suffering, I had to cling to God, and I kind of, at some point, I kind of ran away from God a little bit during COVID, I think. I was trying to stay close to him, but everything that I suffered in the church made it very difficult for a while, for a time. But ultimately, my relationship is with Jesus Christ. And so
not with a particular church.
Not with a church,
or...
but then that's kind of ironic, because then as I've gone through this whole process and dealt with different struggles, I've been searching over the last few years, like, okay, and I became more aware of the spiritual world, the angels and demons, that for some reason in Reformed theology, they don't really focus on that very much at all.
Yeah, the belief is there, but it's not part of
it's not really like part of the ethos, what have you. So so that led me back into charismatic for a while. I started really following a lot of charismatic things, and even visited the Vineyard Church and different. That didn't seem quite right. And then a few months ago, I just came across the Orthodox Church, the Orthodox Christian Church, Eastern Orthodox, as I've shared with you personally. And to me, it kind of just brought everything together. Like, it seems like the fullness of the church as founded by Jesus Christ. And I'm completely enamored with it, completely blown away by the beauty of it and the depth. And I'm experiencing myself, how the prescription, so the Orthodox Church, they really focus on Jesus Christ is the physician of our body and soul, and he has a prescription for us. And
see, they're speaking your language. That's why they got you.
And so the prescription is the liturgy, the divine liturgy, and that's the prescription. And even though it's very mystical and it's very difficult to understand with our intellect, it's starting to soak in. As I've studied it, I've just been voraciously listening to podcasts and reading. As it's soaking into me, I'm seeing how this mystical prescription begins to work and change your heart and your mind, which is what we want, right? Transform your mind. Transform your thinking to be more like Jesus Christ.
We actually did a podcast a while back with my two pastors and Evan, about liturgy and how you think of that as being sort of this like rote thing that like those crazy sort of old people or Catholics or something used to do.
Right.
But that there's a purpose to it. It is formation. It's this kind of
it is
embedding it deep. But I just want to go back to one thing you said, and then we'll close this out. But I asked you what like vivified your faith, and without even thinking, you said suffering. But so many people will say that's the biggest obstacle to faith, is that God would allow suffering. So why do you think it is that for you, suffering made you at some point turn to God in a more, close way, where for some people that's the thing that's like, well, I don't think I can do this anymore?
Well, I think, I had a firm foundation because I had been studying Jesus, studying the Bible, walking with Jesus in whatever limited way that I'm able to do that, but just continuously turning back to Jesus. So I had that foundation. And I also remembered back to that love That first love, when it was like, I was just married to him, he was like literally like we're supposed to, we're the bride of Christ. And I felt that. And so I had that foundation. And while God is not the author of evil or suffering, he takes all of that and redeems it. He uses all of that, just like he did on the cross. He took the worst kind of torture and humiliation and suffering, and he turned it into such beauty.
Yes.
And that's what that's what I really want to impress on anybody that I can is it's the beauty, it's the love of God and Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit that transforms and it draws us in. It's not something in the mind. It's not something you can think through. You can't convince anybody. You can't puzzle it out because our brains are limited.
Yeah.
Our brains are not able to comprehend an incomprehensible God. And he speaks to us through love and beauty.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about just physical beauty, but that's part of it, but the beauty of humility and kindness and forgiveness and those intangible, ineffable qualities that come only from God. And that's what's going to transform the world. And it starts within each of our hearts.
I love it. Good grief. So good. Okay. Is there anything else you want to say to the people that are listening before we close them out? And then I want you to tell people where they can find you.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I did want to add that God, our great God of redemption, he did bring me after my divorce, the most wonderful husband, the love of my life. And I'm just so grateful for him. We work together. His name's Scott.
Yeah.
And he's just an incredible, he's just so patient with me, puts up with me, and we just have the most incredible relationship. And I just give God the glory for that.
Oh,
and,
I love that.
And it gives, and I think I just wanted to give people hope that maybe maybe somebody that's waiting for the love of their life, and that it is out there. It's possible, that God
and there's
can bring
a story that was so hard could be redeemed.
Yes, yes. And I thought it was going to be my marriage that was going to be redeemed. That would be the beautiful story, but that wasn't it. And it was, my new husband. And so I'm very grateful.
Yeah.
So you can find the BioVitality Blueprint on Amazon. All proceeds do go to charity.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
What charity? Or maybe you don't want to say.
It's called Smile Train.
Okay.
And it helps children with cleft lip and palate. So it's on Amazon, the BioVitality Blueprint. And then I'm in Houston. My office is out on the west side of town. And our website is lifesculptmd.com. Lifesculptmd.com.
And you didn't say this before, but you also have like a med spa there.
Yeah.
So you don't just have to have something wrong with your like no zone.
Yeah.
You can actually just want to like get a facial or
yes, we do. Yeah.
facial on steroids.
We do aesthetics. Yeah. It's a really fun part of it. The funnest part maybe. But yeah, we've got aesthetics as well, and just really great estheticians. And then I'm also on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook as my professional account is Love Life Medicine.
Love Life
Medicine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think if you're listening and I'm saying this, maybe this isn't correct. You can stop me if it's not. But if you have like either faith or even like medical questions that feel kind of like intimate or like you haven't had a sort of safe space to explore them, you're somebody that I feel like anybody could come to and be like, okay, is this a normal problem or is this a normal thing to think or how should this be? And you are happy to talk to them and be gentle and kind and share your own stories. So
absolutely. Yeah, we are. My entire team is committed to the mission of creating just a really warm, comfortable space for these delicate, often embarrassing discussions. We've heard it all. So, there's very little that could surprise us. And we're just there to, we're just there to help. There's no shame. And it's just part of health and wellness and life.
Well, you're also being Christ-like in that way. And so I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. If you guys want to learn more about her, you can go and find her. But if you want to learn more about the events that we're doing, ways to support us, you can go to theologybythepint.org and check that out. Come to our events. And until we see you next time, we encourage you, as always, to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.